It was Hungary 2019 all over again last time out in Spain, but this weekend sees the long-awaited return to the tight, twisty street circuit of Monaco. And with many questions yet to answer, we welcome you back to the Formula One Grid Talk podcast to preview all the big talking points ahead of the Formula One Grand Prix de Monaco. My name is Ruby Price, and joining me today we have Philip Mathew.
Hello, hello.
Head of, from the from the Grip Strip podcast.
Yep.
Yeah. There we go. Co-host of the DNF1 podcast, Adam Burns.
Hi, Ruby. Hi, everyone.
Hi. And sports journalist, Mikael Kataja.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Firstly, it's time to give a shout out to Sugar Plum, who left us a 5-star review. And of course, if you enjoy the podcast, we would love it if you could take 5 minutes to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. So, Mikhail, the big F1 news this week is that despite being a late addition to the 2021 calendar as a substitute itself, Formula One will no longer be heading to Turkey, and we will instead be seeing the French Grand Prix moving forward 2 weeks, and an Australian doubleheader filling in the gaps. What are your thoughts?
I mean, of course, I'm kind of disappointed not to go back to Turkey, just considering how interesting it was last year. But I don't feel too bad about having 2 races in Austria. I feel that the Spielberg track does provide, some of the most, entertaining races on the current calendar. Yeah, I mean, at least it's good that they were able to replace Turkey with something. Not that, not that it would have made a big dent if it didn't take place, I guess, or maybe it takes place later in a year, who knows. But yeah, I'm happy we're back in Austria, but would have still liked to see Turkey this year in the calendar as well.
Yeah. So Adam, on the same topic, the Austrian doubleheader last season gave us a very exciting 2 weeks of racing. Do you imagine with how close it is this season, we could see a very explosive 2 weekends?
Absolutely. And, evidence of last season, the Styrian Grand Prix and the Austrian Grand Prix provided different races, if you like. A lot of people were worried that a doubleheader at so early in the season was going to produce basically copy and paste races. It wasn't the case, and hopefully it might provide the same sort of action this season. Although a bit of a bias as a Ferrari fan, I'm certainly hoping that it doesn't turn out the same way as it did in the Styrian Grand Prix last season.
Yeah, that was not a good weekend for Ferrari. But Philip as well, obviously a lot of people have been talking. This would be a very good opportunity for F1 to test their sprint race qualifying format that they're wanting to introduce. Obviously, the British Grand Prix has been sold as being the first location for this, which is why F1 appear to be hesitant to do this. But, what are your thoughts? Do you think this would be a great opportunity to see how much difference it makes to the race weekend?
Yeah, why not? I think it's a good idea, Ruby. I mean, the fact we have to do it, we're supposedly doing it 3 times this year. Why not just do it at Austria? It's a track where the last year, as Adam and Mikhail have said, we had varying different types of racing. The midfield battle, it's tearing off into different levels. But the fact is, McLaren got a podium last year with Lando. You had Lewis making rare mistakes in the first race, and then he came back and won the second race. It's one of Valtteri Bottas's best tracks, for whatever that's worth. So there's all kinds of things. And Red Bull, it's their track. You have Max and you have Checo, who gets off on starting in the back and coming through to the front. So there's all kinds of things that can happen. And do the sprint race format, I think it would be a good idea at this point, because if you're already having to change the schedule, why not try it there? It's a track where you can actually overtake. It's a track where pit strategy can play a role, but it's a tight circuit. So it's a testing, it's a proper test, because you really have to be on it at all times.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other big news this week, Mikhail, the Red Bull rear, after the controversy of the Red Bull rear wings flexing at the Spanish Grand Prix under the loads, F1 are introducing a new form of test to test the parts and stuff of the cars. They've obviously been given a window to make any adjustments to make their cars compliant with these regulations. Do you think that's going to have a big impact on Red Bull, particularly in Monaco this weekend?
I'm not too certain. I mean, again, I understand the reasons for why F1 wanted to take a more, well, I guess, somewhat strict approach to this kind of development. I mean, I'm a bit sad about it, same way as I was sad that the DAS system was banned last season. But yeah, I don't know if it's going to make much of a difference in Monaco. I guess I feel that places like Catalonia, possibly Spielberg as well, are places where that kind of development would be more useful for Red Bull. I don't know if it's going to make too much of a difference in Monaco this season, but yeah, I'm a bit disappointed, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is, and as you say, Monaco has probably not the best place to be testing out the results of this. But let's move on then to looking ahead at this weekend. Adam, Mercedes are obviously very much on the front foot this season, but they do have a very close competition with Red Bull going on, more specifically Max at the minute. But, there's a lot that we could say about that second Red Bull seat, which has already been said for the most part. So, how would you imagine that Mercedes are going to fare this weekend?
Well, to be honest, Ruby, I'm one of those that have kind of backed Max Verstappen and Red Bull at a lot of races this season, and he's come up short for one reason or another. So I would be tempted to say that Mercedes, and in particular Lewis Hamilton, looked the red-hot favourite in Monaco. Having said that, it does seem at this track in particular, as it's quite unique, Monaco, as we all know, as a street circuit, the shorter wheelbase of the Red Bull should give it a slight advantage, especially in a lot of the sections where it gets really tight and twisty. I mean, we saw in Spain at the final sector, Max was mighty a lot of the time. And that should give him the upper hand. Although Max hasn't yet won in F1 at the Monaco Grand Prix, that might play on his mind a bit. He has had a few brushes, to say the least, with the wall. Most notably being qualified a few years ago where he was favoured to win there and he wrecked his weekend by crashing. And the Mercedes does look the more competitive race car, even if it's not the best car in qualifying. So it's so hard to call, but I'm going to stick my neck out on the line. And I do feel that Max is probably a slight favourite, but don't be surprised if Lewis pulls out the goods once again, as he has often done this season already.
Yeah, and Phil, it's certainly not going to be one of those weekends where having your second driver immediately behind you is going to have the biggest impact, but it could still have some form of impact. And I assume Mercedes will be hoping that Valtteri Bottas can be, if he's not immediately behind Hamilton, behind the other Red Bull as a minimum this weekend.
Yeah, I figure Bottas will be able to serve, in terms of his being the second guy, but then also kind of being able to be the blocker of sorts. I think one thing we'll probably mention it during the Red Bull part here in a moment, but the Mercedes, generally the way things have been over the last few years at Monaco, has been good enough at Monaco, been there and with whoever's been driving it. And if Valtteri can go and have a good qualifying, it kind of goes and sets the table, because it's really, I mean, there's lots of people say, oh, Formula One's all about qualifying and then you just follow, but that's not been the case in more races and not in recent years. But at Monaco it is. If you just put your strategy right, you get a good start, you basically where you start is where you're going to finish unless something crazy happens. So it's up to Valtteri to get a good qualifying, get a good week, make a good weekend, consolidate, maybe go and pull out a win. Who knows? He could maybe go and mess with it, but he needs to, honestly, if he wants to get back into the points championship. But I think his better goal is to just go and make sure that Max has to be under stress, and then we'll see what happens from there.
And with the results of the Spanish Grand Prix, Valtteri Bottas finally did move back into the top 3 in the standings. But Mikhail, we've already touched on Red Bull a little bit, but let's have a look at Red Bull's chances this weekend. It's been mentioned Monaco is primarily a qualifying circuit, and Max Verstappen has been pushing the Mercedes to be on at least the front row, if not on first this season. And we have seen that he has made some blistering starts on the race days as well. So I don't think it's necessarily over if he doesn't have pole on Saturday, but the race could be decided in the first couple of meters, don't you think?
Yeah, I definitely think there is a big threat that's gonna be the case. I mean, yeah, I do feel that Max has a very good opportunity this weekend, just because it is, as we say, it's Monaco, it's very special, it's tough to overtake. So let's say that he manages to qualify even second next to Lewis, just a slightly better start and a little dive into first corner, and he could come out as on top. For his sake, I would be more worried about Checo's performance in the qualifying, because although he is a fantastic driver when it comes to racecraft and driving during the race, I'm worried that, especially here in Monaco, if he's not in the top 4 in qualifying, it's probably going to leave Max quite vulnerable again for Mercedes's pit stop strategies, I think.
Yeah, so Adam, do you think that there could be a big old strategic battle between, one Red Bull and 2 Mercedes, or one Mercedes and 2 Red Bull, depending as if Mikhail says, Perez doesn't perform on the Saturday?
Absolutely. And Perez absolutely has to bring his A game. I mean, we saw glimpses of it this season in a few of the races. We saw Bahrain, that recovery he made was, superb. Portimao, the latter stages of that race, he was really good. Brilliant in Imola qualifying, probably could have got pole position, but it didn't work out in a race. He has to try and find a way to up his game to a point where he can be a factor in this battle between Verstappen and the 2 Mercedes, because Bottas has already proven his resourcefulness to force Red Bull into a situation where they had to question their strategy, which Mercedes used to their advantage, particularly at the last race. So Red Bull really need their rear gunner. In terms of the overall battle, I would say that you're going to find, given how close the field is this season compared to how the spread has been in previous years, that Mercedes and Red Bull will have to keep an eye on the Ferraris in particular, the McLarens, of course, maybe even the Alpines, because if they are going to look for a window in strategy where they can try and get their guys out in front of that chasing pack, I think that's going to prove to be very, very difficult. And if they decide to take a gamble on perhaps the medium tires and get through to Q3, one of the slower teams, then that's going to cause all sorts of headaches for them. So it's going to be interesting, but it could depend on who can find a big enough gap to get in that window or get ahead of the midfield.
Yeah, absolutely. As much as a masterclass it was in strategy last weekend, if there hadn't have been that gap back, it wouldn't have been a risk that Mercedes would have taken. So absolutely, you've got to consider the McLarens and the Ferraris. And speaking of the McLarens, Philip, sitting very pretty in P3 at the minute, which is a relief given where McLaren were a couple of years ago. But they're just ahead of the Ferraris in what is such a reminiscent of like 2007, 2008, even if it's only for third and fourth. But they're the only team so far to have finished with both drivers in the points. And provided Ricciardo and Norris both have good qualifyings, you've got to assume that that streak's going to continue.
Yeah, McLaren they're not back the way that everyone would want to say that, they're not winning yet and it may not happen this year. But when you have Daniel Ricciardo, who's a former winner there, he only has 1. He probably should have at least 2 wins there, coming to a racetrack, which he's great at. You have Lando, who I think is taking great steps in his third year to show that, he's going to be someone that's going to be around a long time, just like his other friends. Uh, they're a team that is a sneaky pick here for this weekend if they can put everything together with the Mercedes power unit and the way their car's set up. Both drivers are, now that Daniel Ricciardo's starting to get around the car, he was able to do well at Catalunya, and he had the pace all weekend, and he was able to beat Lando basically the whole weekend. I think it's a good sign for them, and also with Ferrari with the power unit after all they did before. That's also something we'll talk about, but I think their combination is a strong combination too, which is why we have that particular midfield battle right behind the top two teams. There's a second tier as these two teams, which is a positive thing for as we go through the rest of the season, but into 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mikhail, touching on that, a couple of seasons ago when McLaren first joined up with Honda, they viewed Monaco as a really good hunting ground for them because it leveled out the performance field, given, how unreliant it is on that straight line speed advantage. Do you think there's a chance that McLaren could maybe surprise a couple of people and, maybe get a podium or even, second or first?
I mean, if I had to choose a potential outsider to be on the podium in Monaco, I would definitely go for one of the McLaren drivers. I do think they have a strong enough setup to, challenge, at least nibble at the feet of Mercedes and Red Bull. I mean, yeah, as already has been mentioned, that they have Ricciardo, who's been very strong at this track for many years now. Lando, I mean, has been in the rising to the elite of the standings right now. So I would expect them to be the strongest challengers, the third team as such. But yeah, I would assume if there are no collisions between Mercedes and Red Bull drivers, I still would be hesitant to put them on there. But if I had to choose one, I would probably put Ricciardo.
Yeah, Ricciardo, having already previously won here, obviously has that edge that it could give it to him. But Adam, they say never ask a Ferrari fan what's going to happen with Ferrari this weekend, but what's going to happen with Ferrari this weekend? They have been looking at least very much more comfortable than they were in the 2020 car.
Yeah, it's hard to say. You try to be optimistic, and then half the time we end up with egg on our face rather than being pleasantly surprised. Having said that, this season, it has been more the latter. Ferrari have performed probably beyond a lot of people's expectations, certainly mine. Charles Leclerc in particular has been absolutely fantastic. Him and Lando Norris have been two of the biggest stars this season for their teams. And you've got the Carlos Sainz element, who seems to have settled to his new team probably better than any of the other drivers that have done, with respect to Ricciardo having a very impressive weekend last weekend. It's hard to say with Ferrari. I mean, with the car this year, it's definitely a big step forward. As Philip already mentioned, engine performance is not going to be as much of a factor this weekend at Monaco, which I'm sure Ferrari, despite making those improvements they've made, will be much happier knowing that they're not going to be suffering too much of a deficit to the Mercedes or the Honda power cars in particular. So all the ingredients are there for Ferrari to have a very good weekend. It's all going to depend on what the drivers do. Carlos Sainz, fairly handy around Monaco. Charles Leclerc, to date, I would say, has had memorable Monaco Grand Prix, but mostly for fighting from the back and perhaps going for too many overtakes in the track to his own detriment, as he did a few years ago. So we'll have to wait and see. But the way that they're both driving right now, I'd say Ferrari could have a strong weekend. But as Mikael mentioned earlier, it could rely on what happens in front of them, whether or not they might be able to sneak on the podium. But I'm optimistic.
An optimistic Ferrari fan. I can't wait for this weekend. But Philip, touching on the Ferraris, obviously, Charles Leclerc, it is his home race. And as Adam pointed out, he has had memorable but not good home races. Obviously, remember him crashing in the final twisty section of the circuit in 2019. Someone nod. 2019. But yeah, like obviously he's going to want to be rectifying that and given, how optimistic Ferrari are looking at this point as well. Do you think he could pull it off?
Oh, absolutely. It race to race in terms of a driver that outside of the Lewis Max battle, the person that impresses me based on what he has to work with, I think race to race for however many years has been Charles Leclerc, and he's like, how do you do that? Like, how do you pull that out of that car? It's amazing to me, and I know he puts pressure on himself. It's home. It's the same way Lewis did at in the British Grand Prix. It's the same way for all these drivers. It's going to be the same way as Max when they go to the Dutch Grand Prix. Like he wants to do well, and he's having to push a car that isn't the best car. He qualifies. He figures out ways to get qualifying laps out of that thing. I don't know how. Who else can do that? So if he gets a great qualifying run in Q3, what's to say they can't go and mess with it? I mean, pace is going to be an issue, but it doesn't matter about pace. You just get the position, and then you have to dictate how strategy would work and try not to get yourself in traffic. And he has a nice rear gunner in Carlos Sainz too, who is just steady, smooth as ice, just like his legendary father. And one of these days, I wonder something's going to switch with him, and I think he might take that next step forward. But he's always been steady and calm, cool, collected for whoever he's driven for, and it fit very well at McLaren. But I think it fits very well now compared to who they had in that seat last year. The stability has really helped the team rebuild and give Charles Leclerc his ability to go and do what he always does, which is just be insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are presumably going to talk about dealing with traffic at Monaco when we touch on a couple of the latter teams. But yeah, traffic is certainly going to be key. So, Mikhail, moving on to Alpine, sitting fifth in the championship, but still quite some distance away from the Ferraris. Obviously, it's not quite been the season we expected so far from the former Renault team, who were fighting over third at the latter parts of the season, but it's been steady.
Yeah, I mean, it's been okay progress, I would say. I mean, of course, when we learned that Alonso was going to return to the grid, I think everyone was expecting him to be as fierce as he was in his best days, and even in Renault and in Ferrari. Less so at McLaren, I guess, because of the car at the time. But yeah, I wouldn't expect them to perform too well, surprisingly well in Monaco. I don't think it's necessarily the track gives them any particular advantage when it comes to McLaren or Ferrari, whom we should be comparing them to, I guess. Yeah, I don't know what to expect. I would say they will, be fighting for those last few point positions. I don't think there's going to be a reason why they would fall out of that in just terms of just raw speed and the driver's abilities. But yeah, who knows? They might be in for a challenge in Monaco. I guess I like everyone who's fighting in the midfield, since there's not much room for error.
Yeah, and I do think it could potentially come down to strategy this weekend as well, given we saw at the end of the last race, Adam, both the Alpines dropped off significantly in terms of timings. Pierre Gasly managed to catch up to Ocon by about 20 seconds in the space of 5 laps, and Alonso dropped down all the way to 17th towards the end. Obviously, we're going into Monaco with different conditions, different tires, but at the end of the day, strategy does play a big part in these races.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ruby. And it's one of those, as I've already mentioned, that I think a lot of the midfield teams are going to try and see how well they can perform on the medium tyres going into Q3. I think that's going to be really critical. It's going to be a one-stop race unless, there's a safety car out of nowhere or there's weather changes as such. The tyres are more robust this year. And of course, the cars have been stripped down in terms of downforce. So for a team like Alpine that tends to chew up their tyres towards the latter end of stints, will be looking forward to Monaco because they probably won't have to deal with that. So yeah, they're going to be relatively optimistic as well. I think Esteban Ocon has already said they want to be challenging McLaren and Ferrari fairly soon. I'm guessing because those two teams look like they might be looking to 2022 for their car development in terms of priority. I know certainly Ferrari are already doing that, so I imagine McLaren are as well. So yeah, with that in mind, I don't think they're going to have to worry about time management too much. But I think Alpine are really going to need Alonso to make that step up in the way that Esteban Ocon does, because I've been incredibly impressed with Ocon this season, and I'm hoping that continues for him because I think he's got a big future in the sport, but he just needs to get that deal signed with the team for next season.
Absolutely. I could definitely see Ocon leading Alpine into the next couple of, certainly the next technical changes and stuff. So, Philip, let's move on to the AlphaTauris, 5 points behind Alpine, but 5 points ahead of the Aston Martins, which they'll certainly be taking as a win compared to last season, but obviously very early days at this point. But Pierre Gasly's been performing well, and given how we've all mentioned, like this weekend is not about power and speed, it's about having a good car. And the AlphaTauri has looked like a good car when it has been finished with both of its drivers this season.
Yeah, that's going to be the thing this weekend. I mean, for Pierre Gasly, he's proven that he belongs, and I figure his future will not be in the Red Bull program. He'll be going to Alpine, but either way, as he's still there and he's the lead driver there, he's going to pull whatever they give him out of that race car, and it's certain tracks for them. And that's a lot with this midfield, especially now in this tier, where all these cars are really suited to certain types of circuits. The Honda power unit with the torque might give them a better opportunity on the tighter circuit here. I think Gasly had the fastest lap a couple of years ago in the Red Bull. I think that's what I saw here on the stats. So the fact is, it's a circuit that probably suits him very well. It's a car that, when they have it on, is a very good car. He can definitely make something happen this weekend. A top 6 finish, no worse than a top 8 finish could happen. And then, of course, Yuki Sonoda is the new wild thing. He reminds me of Takuma Sato in so many ways because of the passion and energy he has and how aggressive he is. So it's something that is necessary in Formula One, for good and for bad. Yes, you'll take what happens. I mean, it wasn't his fault at Catalunya. He'll go and crash, but you're going to see some amazing overtakes. He's probably going to be the entertainment portion of the Grand Prix unless it rains or something. So if he can finish the race, it's probably going to be pretty good what he's going to do, and they could possibly sneak out a double points finish this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mikhail Sonoda obviously got his first points in the first race, but since then it hasn't quite been as good as a lot of us would have been expecting. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of us need to remember, he is a rookie, and this is obviously his first season in Formula One. And also just how young he is as well. Like, it baffles me that he's born in the year 2000, which makes me feel old. I don't know how it makes other people in this podcast feel, but that still baffles me. But what he needs this weekend is obviously, Monaco is about routine and getting all that practice in. He needs to be from practice 1 out on track, getting into that rhythm, doesn't he?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is a jaw-dropping fact when it mentioned in discussions that he is born in 2000. But yeah, I think this weekend I'm not expecting too much from him. I sort of hope he doesn't try too much, even though it sounds a bit odd. But I do think that in Monaco for him, considering how the last few races have gone, I really hope he doesn't come with and try to overachieve anything. I think, as you said, the routine of just driving around in a narrow street circuit is the most important thing for him. Just avoid collisions in practices. Try to make it to Q2 at least in qualifying, and then just stay away from barriers in the race, and I think it would be a good race for him if he finishes. But yeah, I'm kind of holding back on my hopes for him this particular weekend.
Yeah, a very sedate approach for the weekend for Yuki Sonoda could just result in a good result for Yuki Sonoda. So, Adam, let's move on to Aston Martin. It's definitely not the season they were expecting to have, but with Stroll on 11, no, Stroll finished 11th last race and Vettel still yet to actually finish in the points. They need to be further up the grid this weekend as well, don't they?
Absolutely right. And Aston Martin, I don't know if you feel sympathy for them or not over what's happened. I mean, last season they had the third best car, whether through virtue of their own brilliance or by virtue of borrowing the brilliance from others and then making their own interpretation of that. Having said that, with the rule changes that have happened this season, they've been very outspoken, particularly Otmar Zafner has been very outspoken over the injustice that he feels over the rule changes really hurting cars like his own and also the Mercedes cars, the lower rake end of the spectrum, if you like, whereas the Red Bulls and AlphaTauris have benefited the most on the higher end. With that being said, Mercedes have really got on top of the issues with their car relatively quickly to the point where they probably have the best race car, whereas Aston Martin, by contrast, have really struggled. And I don't really see that changing this season. I feel that they put a lot of effort into the upgrades that they introduced for Stroll in Portimao and for Seb in Catalonia. And in the end, they still ended up scoring no points. So you really have to ask the question, should they really focus on carrying on developing this car, or should they just switch all their priorities for next year? If it were me, I'd probably go with the latter. And it pains me to say that because I'm a huge Sebastian Vettel fan and also rate Stroll very highly as well. I think people are starting to realize that Lance Stroll is a very good driver now. It took a while for it to come that way, but he's definitely showing his qualities now. And so I'm not expecting miracles from Aston Martin. I think this is a track where they're going to struggle a lot more than most owing to the concept of their car and also running a longer wheelbase than others, as I said, based on last year's Mercedes or the year before, if you like. And I don't think Seb is at the level he needs to be yet to get the most out of this car, but he's getting better. But I suspect another difficult weekend for Aston Martin.
Yeah. Philip, do you have anything to add on that? Obviously, Adam suggesting that Aston Martin go down the developing for 2022 route and maybe pick up a point here or there. What's your take on that?
Yeah, the way they've looked this year, and I've said it, whether it's here or whether it's on the GSP, that it's basically a throwaway. That's probably best suited to go and get started on 22, go and try to put yourself in a position to compete there. I mean, yeah, Stroll will go and get you the odd point here and there. Vettel, I don't know where he is, where his mind's at. I talked about it in the sense that when he crashed at Germany 2 or 3 years ago, I think that was a turning point of his career. He was still at a great level at that point, and he made that mistake. And ever since then, he hasn't been the same. And I don't think he's ever gotten out of it. And, I find it interesting that Lawrence Stroll made the decision to replace a guy who was running at a very high level in Checo Perez, who had been there how many years and was part of the reason they saved the team. I get it as a 4-time world champion, but it was a 4-time world champion that hasn't been able to perform at an elite level in about 3 years. So I guess we're going to find out next year because they're not going to really do anything this year. Their goal is to stay ahead of those bottom 3 teams, and that they'll be able to do that with this car. It's a case of how many points they're really going to get here and there as they go along through the season.
Indeed. So, Mikhail, let's move on to the Alfa Romeos, the 2 Alfa teams. Obviously, 12th and 15th last time out with Raikkonen and Giovinazzi. Where do you see Alfa Romeo performing this weekend? Because they could either show up and surprise everyone and, maybe challenge for points, or they could, be fighting over with Williams and the Haas all weekend.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword to say that, yeah, Monaco is one of their best chances to score points because obviously you're likely to have not the full grade come finish. So if you're able to put 2 cars into the let's say the 15 cars that finish, the odds of you one of them being on points is higher than if everyone finishes. I do think also that this weekend they might be, I mean, as the guys discussed about the struggle that the Aston Martin cars might face in Monaco. I do believe that Alfa Romeo have a chance to challenge them legitimately at this track. But yeah, again, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily put them on like the track trajectory towards points, but I do believe that they might actually be, fare better than on a regular track, let's say.
Yeah, and at least then Raikkonen and Vettel do have a lot of experience from last season of fighting each other on track, which
True.
might help them for this weekend. Adam, the Alfa Romeo is obviously Raikkonen, Giovinazzi. Giovinazzi has been proved to have some great starts of races, which at Monaco, that's going to be pretty vital for their strategy being pulled off, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, Giovinazzi is one of the drivers on the grid that is very much fighting for his Formula One career this season. I don't think it's a secret that Kimi Raikkonen is probably in his final season in Formula One. I'd be very surprised if Alfa kept him on, given the fact that the main reason why he stayed on this season was just to homologate the issues that they would have had bringing in a young driver like Callum Ilott, for example, into this year's car. Although granted, he did rather well in the practice session in Portimao. I think it was half a second off of Kimi, only 1 run. So that was brilliant from him. But Alfa Romeo will be looking to the future, and I'm pretty sure Giovinazzi wants to be part of that. But he has been pretty good. I would say the last couple of races, he's definitely upped his pace, and he is looking at least more than a match for Kimi, and in some cases a bit better as well. So, for Alfa Romeo this weekend, they've been the most under the radar team. I don't think anyone's paid much attention to them other than in practice when they run their car very, very light. So they're always near the top of the timesheets and surprise everybody. And then, of course, as the weekend goes on, we see where their real pace is. But I think the name of the game for them, as it will be for the other 2 teams at the back of the field, is keep your nose clean, stay out of trouble, and then just see where you end up towards the end of the race, as Jules Bianchi did back in 2014 when he famously got into the points for Marussia just by driving a clean race amongst all the chaos. So that will be the name of the game for Giovinazzi, and I'm sure Kimi as well.
Yeah, and that is a very good point as well. The bottom 3 teams obviously all being on 0. If they pick up 1 point at Monaco this weekend, it could make all the difference in the championship battles. And Philip, one of those drivers who will be absolutely dying to get, a point, but maybe steal a point this weekend, George Russell in the Williams. The Williams obviously performing okay on a Saturday, at least with both Russell and Latifi every now and then. But as soon as it comes to the race day, their car just does not perform at all, apart from the exception being Imola. But we know how that turned out.
Yeah, it's the struggles of George in the Williams. It's partly a sad thing. It's partly on misfortune. But the reality is he's giving it his all, and I think the positive thing is there is some pace at times that he's able to get into Q2 and do that. And then, the car is not very good at all. And Capito or whatever has already said that they're not focused on this year. So trying to get a point would be at places like Monaco, places that are going to be could be a lottery of sorts. You could do some interesting, like start long, go long, and try to move something, make something happen, get a safety car. Hopefully he can do that. It would be a nice thing to see, to get him a point in a Williams. Latifi has surprisingly been much better, which, considering where he has been, I think it's a positive sign for them, considering what their future is going to be with him probably being one of the drivers. Him taking steps forward in his progress and his ability is good for the overall team. And we'll see what happens with Williams. It'll be very difficult for them, but then that's just been the case. So hopefully for George's sake, I think he can give himself a chance to finally get that point for them.
Yeah, and Mikhail, do you have anything to add on the Williams for this week? And obviously, their car is one of the worst on the grids, but so was the Mana Marussia of 2014.
Yeah, I mean, I am interested to see what George is able to do in the qualifying, especially. I mean, Monaco is not an easy track to pull, an outstanding performance from a car that is by any means not outstanding. So if he's able to make it into Q2 here, I will be very impressed, and it will of course bode well for him. If you were to start 15th, 14th, put on a medium tire, outlast most of the people around you, and then hope pray for a safety car. So definitely he could have a decent race, staying out of many clashes, but it's just a question of Saturday if he's able to, and I don't know if that Williams is going to give him enough speed to make it to Q2 in Monaco.
Yeah, and a team that we know most likely will not have the speed to get into Q2 this weekend, Adam. The Haas cars, obviously, it's basically last year's car with a paint job and one driver tied back in the garages. But, we did see Mick Schumacher make an overtake in Portimao. Could we see something special? And how that qualifies as special for a Haas is pretty incredible given the circumstances. But do you think we could see something special this weekend from F1's exciting rookie this season?
You can never rule it out. And, I've loved following Mick Schumacher's progress in Formula One. I was a massive fan of his father. Growing up watching Formula One, my earliest memories were of Michael winning in the Ferrari at Barcelona in '96 in the rain. And whilst Mick probably doesn't showcase the ceiling of potential that his father has, he's not too far away from that. And, what I've seen of him going through the junior categories and what we're seeing in Formula One is adaptability and his method of just learning, putting the work in. And in a car this season where the expectations are low, in that all he needs to do is keep his nose clean and finish the race, there's still a lot that you can learn from that in Formula One. I mean, I'm thinking of Ayrton Senna in the Tolman back in the early 80s, Fernando Alonso in the Minardi in 2001, amongst several others that have paid their dues in those smaller teams before obviously being successful in Formula One. Mick Schumacher's already doing that in some regard in the Haas. And of course, you already mentioned Ruby overtaking Latifi in Portimao, which proves to be one of the most exciting battles that weekend. There's a lot that can be said for what Mick is doing. So in his case, hopefully he can just keep his nose clean, as I've already mentioned with the Alphas, drive the race he needs to drive. And you never know, it could be a big result for Haas. Maybe not points, but as I said, I've seen stranger things happen in Formula One, and Mick's doing a fine job so far for Haas. So hopefully he can continue that this weekend.
Yeah, so Philip, let's talk about the driver nobody enjoys watching, but most certainly nobody enjoys following. And this has been a very big talking point going up into the Monaco Grand Prix. That second Haas driver and blue flags. Do you think that could have an impact on the final result this weekend?
Absolutely. And I find it interesting how it always seems to land on this show, how I get egghead. I don't know if it's just by chance or if it's by the fact that I'm willing to call him egghead. He is literally one of the worst drivers I've ever seen in my life. Vladdy's illegitimate son does not know what a mirror is or what a blue flag is. I've been saying on my show that he's probably going to get his butt whipped, and this weekend is the opportunity, because whether it's Lewis, whether it's Valtteri, Max, or Checo, or insert some other driver, this is there is one track on the circuit where being in the way could literally be the death knell of everything. It's Monaco, and Egghead does not know what he's doing half the time. I mean, even Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll flipped him off. It's Lance Stroll, but it's like he flipped him off in practice. He held up Lando Norris in qualifying at Catalunya last week. It's like at some point there isn't enough penalty points, and there's not enough ceremonial penalties for him to start tailback when he's going to be 3 seconds off of Mick. I mean, that's the thing. Mick is beating him by a lap every single race in the same car, which is literally the biggest piece of garbage that's been made in probably about 10 or 15 years in Formula One. Or not 10 or 15 years, probably since when we had the backmarker teams with the funding deal. But cars are horrible. But Mick goes out there and does like what Adam and said, like he does the job. And he's somebody that if he was in an Alpha, like an Alpha Sauber, I think he'd be able to do some work in that car. And if you had Callum Ilott in either in a Haas or an Alpha, they would actually have something to work with. Yeah, the car would be terrible still, but at least you have two cars that are competitive. Instead, you have this guy who's liable to his thing is he makes himself a part of every weekend, and he will make himself a part of this weekend, whether it's on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or every single day, frankly, because of who he is and how useless he is.
I do question as to whether that's one of the Haas marketing strategies they've got going on. Like, you will feature in the highlight reel because we will be involved in the race somehow, just not in the way that most F1 sponsors join a team for. But
that's why they want that rich energy money, so that's the way to get it.
Yeah, I mean, one question would be what rich energy money based on the last time that they joined F1, and if they were impressed with the performances that time around. Boy, are they going to be unimpressed with the performances this time around. But let's move on to our predictions for this weekend. So we need a top 3 from everybody. So, Mikhail, what's your top 3 for this weekend?
I feel like I feel like backing Verstappen for a win in Monaco. I do believe that even if he doesn't make it on the pole on Saturday, I do think that he has a legitimate chance of challenging whether it's Lewis or Valtteri on pole. Probably Lewis, but so for my top 3, I would go with quite an eventful Verstappen, Hamilton, Bottas.
Hamilton, Verstappen, Bottas. I mean, it is the most common podium that we've had in Formula One now. I think it is.
Verstappen, Hamilton, Bottas. Yeah,
Verstappen, Hamilton, Bottas.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. I thought that was what you said the first time.
No, victim. It's old habit.
Old habits, indeed. So, Adam, what's your top 3 prediction going to be?
Yeah, I mean, it is tempting to go for Ham Bottas in it just out of just how common it's become in Formula One. Even, it's amazing how that stat is as they've done it so much. I'm going to, fall back on what I said earlier. As I said, I've often backed Max this season and it hasn't come true. I'm still going to back him for this weekend. I just feel that, for what I said earlier, I feel the Red Bull is going to be a lot more suited to this track than Mercedes. And I think some of the strengths that we've seen from Mercedes this season are going to be mitigated at this track more than others just because of the unique nature. It's going to come down to whether Max can hold his nerve, stay out of trouble, and deliver as he probably has tried to do earlier this season. So, I'm going to go for Verstappen first, Hamilton second. And I said this before, I'm going to go for Charles Leclerc P3. Call it bias for Ferrari, but I feel like they could, he in particular could do something. And as the Monaco locals will probably be fortifying their houses out of fear that Verstappen might end up in one of them. Take your pick which yacht it's going to be. But that's my prediction.
You actually stole my prediction as well there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. But Phil, what's your prediction for this weekend after revealing mine?
Well, clean sweep on the winner. It's not my ideal scenario, of course, as a Hamilton guy, but I'm going to go with Verstappen because I just feel like after getting his soul taken at the Spanish Grand Prix, he needs to respond, and Red Bull have to respond, and this is a track that's going to suit him before those new regulations really play a role at Baku. He goes out there, gets the win over Hamilton, and Checo finally gets a result, top 3 finish for Red Bull. So 2 Red Bulls on the podium this coming weekend with Ver-Ham pair.
Ver-Ham pair. Wow. I mean, having a pair of Red Bulls on the podium, I don't think has happened this season yet, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah. Anyway, looking at some bold predictions now. One bold prediction would be that there won't be any track limits infringements or complaints. But obviously, this is Monaco, and there are still some areas of the track that aren't, guarded by a metal barrier. So it might happen. But let's get some bold predictions going. Mikhail, what you expect? Well, what aren't you expecting but are predicting?
I kind of hinted at this already. I am expecting the Alfa Romeos to be more in the mix when it comes to the lower middle field than in general. So I'm just gonna go and say that one of them is gonna get on points somehow.
An Alfa Romeo in the points. Adam, your bold prediction, please.
Oh man, it's tough at this race, but as I said, anything can happen. So contrary to what I said earlier about them, I'm going to say Sebastian Vettel scores a point this weekend.
It is technically a bold prediction given the statistical, results of this season so far.
Yeah, I mean, well, given what I said about Aston Martin, I'd probably say, that people will be saying, well, you said they weren't going to do anything this weekend. So yeah, no, Seb to get a point, I'd say.
Seb to get a point. Phil, your bold prediction, please.
I was thinking about that one because when he's finished, he's finished in the top 10, so 10 out of 12 starts. And I was debating that, but I'm going to do the thing because I'm also a George Russell mark. I'm going to do it. It has to be a thing on this show that I'm going to pick George Russell to score a point at Monaco because that just is how we do it on this show. So I have to do it. George Russell finally gets that point for Williams.
I mean, if it's not George Howson cheering for George, it's Philip or me, or, take your pick of the Grid Talk presenters. But my bold prediction, I think I'm going to go with 3 safety cars this weekend. We've not seen that many across the season, but it's Monaco, baby. As Jensen Button has previously said, safety cars are just what you expect. And with that has been this week's show. I would like to now hand the mic over to each presenter to give them their respective podcasts and other media a plug. Adam, let's go with you first in the DNF1 podcast.
Thanks, Ruby. So DNF1 F1 podcast, as Ruby's already mentioned, is a similar show to Grid Talk where we discuss all of the talking points in Formula One. Has some great guests, great hosts. We had George on not too long ago, and I'm pretty sure we'll have a few more of the Grid Talk family on that show soon. So definitely check that out on YouTube, DNF1, all in capital letters.
And Philip, the Grip Strip podcast.
Yeah, the GSP. Thanks, Ruby. The GSP 60 episodes strong, going on number 61 this week. Goes over all motorsports. Formula One is a big part of our deal, of course, and George. And we've had Tom from the Monkey Seat on. We've had a lot of F1, IndyCar, NASCAR. If it's got wheels, and it goes fast. It's talked about on the Grip Strip podcast. You can find us anywhere that you can find podcasts, and give us a follow, give us a like, and thanks for listening here and listening there.
And Mikhail, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
Coming after these two podcast professionals, probably not. But yeah, if you're interested, you can follow me at the Twitter handle Mikael Kataja. I basically mostly contribute with F1 Chronicle and then Sportlight as well on F1.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to follow me, I am a YouTuber myself, Ruby Price on YouTube. I've been going for a while. Just give me a follow if you fancy it. And with that, Grid Talk is available on Amazon as well as YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, Omni Studio, and Pocket Casts. Just search F1 Grid Talk. We have a huge back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to the qualifying and race results. We are on Reddit, search for the subreddit F1 Grid Talk, and we also have a Patreon for mics, lights, and better recording equipment. Also, make sure that you subscribe so that you're the first to know when each new weekly episode is released. We'll be back at the weekend to review the results from the Monaco Grand Prix. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for our panelists for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
If you are watching the YouTube stream, we will still be sticking around for a bit of a post show to answer your questions and talk about anything else that we happen to have missed. But other than that, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye. We have had some YouTube comments going along. So from Sol Helios, quick question, prediction on who will be on pole this Monaco race. Who's expecting a good result from Red Bull in qualifying then?
They're going to have to, aren't they, if they're going to win this race? But I imagine how many of us are in agreement that Verstappen is probably the most likely candidate for pole?
I think he's got a chance, but part of me does really want Lewis to finish on pole. I'm just a big Hamilton fan, really.
He's had 100 poles already. Let someone else have a turn.
Yeah.
100 and counting.
Oh, that's insane numbers from Lewis. That really is.
Yeah.
I kind of wish that he was on 99 wins and he was able to go and get 100 here. It would be an epic deal. It's not one of his better tracks either, so it would have been a big deal. But unfortunately, probably will have to wait, and he won't be able to go to Canada either for 2 years, which is probably his best circuit. And so we'll see. It'll probably be Baku and like Styrian Grand Prix or some crap like that.
Mikhail, are you expecting Red Bull on pole this weekend?
I don't know. I feel like leaning towards Lewis still on the pole, even though I am expecting Max to get it at some point during the race. I do have an inkling that Lewis might still just edge out on pole on Saturday.
Lewis could be nowhere in P1, 2, and 3 and Q1 and 2, and he'd still show up with 5/10 in his hands in Q3.
Yeah.
It's why he's got those 100 poles.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll back him on this one, but I do expect Max to get it in the end on Sunday.
Yeah. We've also had a comment from Josh Revel. Haas going to run through all their front wings this weekend. Either that or the other Haas driver is going to take a dive into the Mediterranean. I mean, we've seen a lot of memes regarding like the FIA debuting like a safety boat rather than a safety car this weekend. I wouldn't be surprised, but also we've spent all of this time, building up, other Haas driver and Monaco. Nothing is going to happen this weekend because of it, is it?
No, he's either going to drive so slow that they're just going to have to go and it wouldn't even matter, or he literally will end up like the movie Grand Prix in the sea, which would be great. But more than likely he'll drive around so slow that he'll literally just be with flashers on. They'll just put flashers on and hazards, everything. Yeah, I'm here. Go over there. Yeah, that's what it'll be. They should put the chicane like they had for the Formula E. Now that would be epic. They'll definitely have 3 safety cars if we had the Formula E chicane at Monaco instead of the one they usually have there, because that was where DaCosta made his epic pass. So
which chicane's that? I think I don't really follow Formula
the
E.
Nouvelle, I think, isn't it called the? I mean, is it the Nouvelle chicane? The Nouvelle chicane, they altered it to make it even tighter than what it usually is, and because of that, it made it more of a passing zone. Albeit they're going slower, but still, you need to be. It was an amazing overtake by DaCosta there. So, I mean, if they did that with these cars, I'm sure there would be wrecks, and I'm sure Egghead would go off into the guardrails for sure, because he'd hit the wrong pedal or something.
Be surprised if you could fit a Formula One car through that tighter Nouvelle chicane. I mean, DaCosta and Mitch Evans were literally rubbing off one another, no pun intended, as they were going through that area. So, yeah, that would be fun to watch. I imagine Mazepin would have fun with that in qualifying. And you'd probably end up, I'd be like that racing film about Monte Carlo where it goes off through the barrier and into the river.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's Grand Prix. That's it.
Grand Prix, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, be a bit like that.
It's kind of odd to be expecting that there's only 2 things that are going to happen to his race, which is either he's going to be too slow and just get flagged every single lap starting from lap 10, or he's going to crash into the barriers within those first 10 laps. And those are the only 2 scenarios I can see happening in the race.
Yeah, he's literally in that Milka Duno level of he needs to get flagged off the racetrack because he's too slow. Like that's an epic level of suck that I haven't seen in a long time. That's like going back to the 90s. It's like going to, like they talked about Vettel called Carthagena a cucumber. Like that's the kind of level that this guy is at. And I'm a Carthaginian person because I'm Indian, but the fact of the matter is that car was terrible and he was bad in it. So it's like, what are you gonna do? But this guy's up there, man. He's really terrible. And we spend way, the sad thing is I speak about this and I give him way more PR than he deserves.
I've just been looking at the weather forecast for this weekend. This race weekend. It's going to rain on Wednesday, which is typical. But then it's going to be sunny with high temps until the end of the race weekend. So weather's not going to play out.
That's fine.
Even if it said it was raining, it would be a dry race.
Yeah.
The weather forecasts have been the most unreliable thing in Formula One of late. I don't know if anyone else has picked up on this, but it always seems to say it's going to rain at every race where you expect Mercedes to dominate just to spice things up, and then it doesn't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
It's just the F1 game thing of Jeff says it's going to rain in 10 minutes and then 15 minutes later, we might see some rain in 25 minutes. And it's like, you told me it was coming in 10.
I hate Jeff.
Yeah, everybody hates Jeff. If I was able to play, I'd hate Jeff too. I see enough F1 YouTubers, whether it's TM at Marduk or freaking Jimmy driving, they don't like Jeff either. But yeah, that's one thing. I think that's like NASCAR with their phantom cautions and stage breaks and stuff. The F1, they say, it's going to rain. So then everyone gets excited. Oh, it's going to rain. It's going to rain in like 10 minutes. And then you look 10 minutes later, nothing. Oh, okay.
I remember a Monaco Grand Prix a couple of years ago where like McLaren kept telling Jenson Button, we're waiting for the rain. We're waiting for the rain. So like they just kept him out for something like 50 laps and then rain never came during the race. So they pitted him. But like at that point, his strategy had been wrecked because they were so certain that rain was going to hit the circuit.
Mm. Yeah.
Really, it's just waiting for a safety car, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
under
really
the guise of rain.
Mistakes were made, I guess.
I mean, there's definitely going to be VSCs. There's going to be. I mean, I think the combination, I think your call, Ruby, would have been 3 total with VSCs, and because I think I think now they're trying to do more of the full safety cars. I think they're trying to get away from the VSC for whatever reason, but there definitely is going to be VSCs for sure because there's no runoff. And I'm curious, there will be one big wreck. I figure there's going to be one big wreck. I just don't know where, but when or how, but there will be one.
Well, one thing I've always been surprised about is that now we're in an era of Formula One where we don't have refueling, is why they don't revert back to the rules from 2008, or 2007, I should say, when they banned pit stops under the safety car. Otherwise, you'd incur a penalty. Because back then, obviously, there were drivers that would incur a penalty if they had to make a pit stop for fuel, and some of them had to take that chance and get a 10-second penalty later. But nowadays, obviously, they don't have that issue. So I don't see why they don't bring that rule back if they want to avoid situations where someone benefits from a safety car. I mean, like Lewis in Imola, for example. I mean, obviously, it was within the rules. Everyone just forgot that back markers can overtake the safety car, but they always seem to remember these things when it suits Lewis. Typical. No, it's true.
Like a Ferrari fan.
Well, no. I say
I know
that.
what you mean.
I say that because everyone always seems to moan about these things when it suits Lewis, and I think, well, the rules are the rules. It's never been a problem. That's the haters for you, but yeah.
It's like the Italian Grand Prix last year. He pitted, and right when he pitted, it was like the double whatever they said it was a safety car, and then he ended up having to go tailback because they wanted. The reality is, he did pit. They didn't pit him at the right time, but then they gave Lance Stroll a free pit stop, and if he was any good, he would have made a start and he'd have probably won that race. I mean, that's literally the same kind of. There's things that they do in Formula One. I mean, that's with every series. That it doesn't really make any sense. I mean, if you don't want to have pit stops, I mean, they should at this point. If they didn't have pit stops, then it would just become an economy run, which would be I mean,
That's
the problem
basically what we're
is-
going to end up with the
what-
sprint races for
Yeah.
a
Oh,
short
yeah.
period.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
because they're not, because that's the thing that I don't get about the sprint races is they're not giving you an extra power unit. They're not giving you extra parts of any kind. You're using the same 3 power units and you're doing extra mileage. Like, I don't get what the deal is. All they're going to do is just drive around. I'm like, okay, great. Like, it's not F3, it's not F2 where they're just driving balls to the wall. They're trying to prove something. You're just trying to not wreck your cars so then you have something for Sunday. It's
Yeah, I mean, I think they've kind of gone in with the logic that you've got 3 sprint races that are 100 kilometers long. So in theory, it's a third of a race. So you've basically got the 3 races that are going to make up 1 full race distance. And given that the engines are supposed to, well, they have 3 a season and sometimes 2 parts of others, they're probably thinking in theory, it's 8 races per piece that they have. So 3 sprint races equals 1 full race. It's probably like, actually, the engine should be capable of doing that last bit. But I just think the reasons that they said the sprint races are worthwhile to attract the younger fans is totally the wrong way to go about it, because the reason why a lot of young fans don't watch Formula One, at least 2 hours of Formula One races, is not because they don't want to, it's because they can't afford to, because everything's a subscription service now. Whereas when I was growing up watching Formula One as a kid, it was on free-to-air TV in the UK, it was free-to-air all over. I think Germany was the last country to keep it free-to-air until they had no choice, and they had the largest fan base, and all of a sudden that's now gone because they're on a subscription-based service like everybody else is.
Yeah,
I
true.
mean, we've been on cable here for the whole entire time I've watched Formula One. It was on ESPN for the longest time. It's back on ESPN now with the Sky feed. We used to actually have people call the race. Then it went to like Fox and Speed Vision and Speed and all that, and then it went to NBC, and now it's back on ESPN. But it's the Sky feed, so I get what you guys get. So I'm I actually appreciate it more or less than what we've had at times over the years. There are times and things that I'd probably want to change, but there's people that I do respect there. But yeah, it sucks and it's amazing when there's like that's the funny part yesterday with the IndyCar race because Grosjean ended up having a great run. How much people were so mad about how the ads are. I'm like, you think IndyCar races have ads? You've never watched a NASCAR race. That is the worst. That is the absolute worst in terms of ads. Indy cars are not. It's not good. The NBC and hopefully when they go to their new broadcast partner next year, it might change. But if you think IndyCar races have a lot of ads, you have not watched NASCAR races. Those have ads.
This is
Like
why I
every
was
5
grateful when
laps.
it moved over to BBC from ITV when I first started watching, because obviously the BBC is entirely ad free. It's not perfect, but it's good. But then obviously, like when it moved to Sky, obviously it's behind the paywall and all of that stuff as well. And it's just, if you want fans to be able to watch something, don't have them then being able to have to pay an extra £40 minimum just to watch the Formula One.
It's mad. I remember the 98 Japanese Grand Prix, like we're going quite a bit far back, so I'm showing my age a little bit here, but these were on ITV as well. And I don't know if you'll remember, Ruby, but the most annoying thing happened in that race where Hakkinen and Schumacher were fighting each other for pole and qualifying. It was a brilliant qualifying battle, and Schumacher just edged Hakkinen, and Schumacher had to win that race to win the championship. And what happened was Schumacher stalled, went to the back of the field, so all of a sudden Hakkinen had the advantage. And then as Schumacher was making his way through the field, it cut to a break, and all you saw when it come back was Mika Hakkinen having his pit stop and Murray Walker saying, "You are now looking at the 1998 world champion," because Michael Schumacher's out of the race. Smashed his rear tire because he punched it, and all you saw was Schumacher on the wall at turn 2 and just thinking, the hell, I got up early to watch this stuff and all of a sudden it's over and I didn't even get to see what happened. So it's how frustrating ads can be.
Yeah, I watch. I've started watching wrestling since the first lockdown started, and watching that, and then coming back after their ad breaks to seeing a completely different scenario to what it left is just a big old taste of how much I don't like adverts being shown on live events.
Yeah, that at least for here with the IndyCar and on NBC, I mean, even though they have tons of ads, they do the side by side, and they try to do side by side, but it's not great, but it's better than the alternative of just a full ad. And then those are 3.5 minutes when you're in a race that it could be where everything changes right there in that 3.5 minutes, and then you're in a commercial. Oh, great. And then they have to explain it, and now they don't explain things anymore because these people aren't paying attention that are in the booth, most of them. So it's like, okay, that's just super. I mean, that's at least with Formula One, I will say with Crofty and Martin that they have a great combination and they're able to play off each other very well. And and then when they have Kravitz down there, you're getting good information that way. And then a couple of the other people, I mean, you have all the drivers and stuff. They add some good, most of them add good stuff. Even Nico, for whatever he's worth, does. So.
Oh, Nico's an excellent pundit. I wish Rosberg was on there more often. I really do. Him and Karen Chanduk, I could listen to them talk about Formula One cars all day. They're so good.
Yeah, Karun, and I'm more of a, it's okay, whatever. I get it.
I've warmed up to Karun, but him being brought in as a replacement for Ted Kravitz when they tried to shove Ted Kravitz out the back door, took some adjusting to.
Yeah, I finally get to hear Ted Kravitz and the Kravitz notebook and everything, and now you're going to fire him? I'm like, no, I've waited all these years. And then he's back sometimes. I'm like, okay, I could tell the difference when he's on the Grand Prix, not because he's just there, but you could just tell there's a different vibe, a different energy that he adds. And him and Crofty have a great interplay with each other. And I think that's part of it too. It's very genuine and natural. And I think that's part of what makes I enjoy the broadcasts. And I guess because whatever his name is, Bratches, knows somebody at ESPN, we get free to air. So I'm like, okay, I'll take it. Whatever it is, I'll take it. It's better than what we had before because we'd have ads every 6 laps or 8 laps or whatever. So
yeah, there's a lot that gets said about Crofty, but one thing I will give him is he has great chemistry with all of the other team that he has to present the shows with. So as much as he gets names wrong and misses key details,
and he screams a little bit.
He is a good commentator at the end of the day, I would say.
He's a lot better than a lot of people. I'll take Crofty over Jack Nichols any day, and I'll take Crofty over most of the people we have here in the States too, because most of the people we have in the States are terrible. So I'll take his passion and personal biases, because it's kind of like he's following Murray Walker. So at the end of the day, he's kind of like playing it up. Like, I kind of have to be Murray Walker, the greatest ever. I'm like, well, yeah, you're going to go and F up stuff, and then you're going to make some flubs, and you're going to go and scream about British drivers. Yeah, we get it. We know. That's kind of like part and parcel. Murray Walker did it, so I can do it too,
Yeah. Something I'm surprised that, well, I didn't realize, but something I'm surprised that it didn't come up in this podcast episode. It's going to be Williams's 750th F1 Grand Prix weekend, this race weekend. But
wow.
I'm surprised. The closest they're coming to running a heritage livery is the one that they're running this season anyway, really. And
that's not even a good livery. It's not a great livery.
I don't like the number style that they've got, and particularly in practice, that was not a 63. No matter what Williams tried to say about George Russell's numbering, but I do quite like the livery. I think it's the best since the first Martini one that they introduced in 2014.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess I'm more of I liked it when they had BMW and they were able to bring it back to the Brabham days. I liked the clean white and blue livery. And then I also remember when I first watched, which was the Canon and Camel with the yellow, blue, and white. So it kind of had like a kind of rectangular, kind of squared off thing. And I kind of always think about those paint schemes and liveries. And that's probably why. But hey, whatever.
Yeah, it's a shame about cigarette brands, because obviously it's a good idea not to advertise them, but they did come up with some great liveries over the years.
Tons of money too.
Oh well, obviously, yeah. But we got to put morals before cash at some point. Formula One does have a fine line, but yeah.
Morals
they are still showing up on certain cars, just not as the tobacco brand that they are, or as
Mission Winnow
subsidiaries and stuff.
Yeah, well, Mission Winnow is the obvious one.
Yeah.
They're not really contributing to the livery in any positive way. So
yeah, you can make that any color you like. That green is never going to grow on me.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I do like the Ferrari design, like, its stubby nose and stuff has kind of grown on me a little bit, but it's still not it's not the glamour and glitz that, you associate with Ferrari, and especially with, the perfectly tinted chroma key green. I'm surprised more hasn't been done with that so far.
Well, you never know. At races where they won't be able to run that, they might decide to encourage fans to use a green screen and just put their pictures on so they're bespoke to them.
Personalized Ferrari livery.
Yeah, absolutely. You might do something like what Williams has done, obviously, with their 750th race, where they might have your name and the number on their car. Ferrari might say, submit your green screen applications. You might see your face on the broadcast.
Man. Has anyone thought of anything that we might have potentially missed during the post show? Because I've exhausted my news sites.
What about McLaren's announcement later tonight? What do we think that's going to be?
McLaren are making an announcement?
Well, in the last week, they had a bunch of journalists. This is how I can tell none of you watch my podcast, because I talked about this last week.
I've been off social media for the last 2.
Fair enough. But no, we talked about this last week. McLaren had made an announcement to some journalists at the technology center that they were going to make a special announcement to everyone. So they've already told them what it is, but it was under the condition that they didn't release any information until McLaren made the announcement at Monaco. And a lot of people have been speculating over what it's going to be. Could it be they're announcing an entry into Formula E because they got their Gen 3 cars starting from 2022, so they might be entering at that point? Could it be a special livery for the Monaco Grand Prix where they return to the old chrome and red or the black and white that they ran in the late 90s? It's all up in the air at the moment, but apparently people on the inside that have heard about this are apparently saying this is actually quite a big thing. So I'm just wondering what you guys might think it is.
Could be a major sponsor is what it could be, because it's
Rich
Monaco.
Energy.
Major sponsor.
It has been a while since we've had like a major sponsor working with McLaren. Like, obviously Zach Brown has done an amazing job getting in, all the ones that they've been able to replace that decided to leave during the Honda era.
Yeah.
But a major sponsor with McLaren could be so many different people. You've got all those historic ones like Vodafone, Lucasade, West, obviously probably less likely to happen, as well as the Marlboro one. But yeah, I've got absolutely no idea what McLaren are potentially teasing.
Well, I mentioned Formula E because I think that might be the obvious one, given that McLaren have been talking about this. And as you said with Indy, Philip, obviously they've been increasing their involvement in that with the McLaren Arrows team. Yeah. It's all up in the air. I think it might be Formula E, just because it might be an appropriate time to announce an entry into that sport. And I think more manufacturers are going to be involved in Formula E as it develops, especially with Gen 3 coming soon. But I'll be honest with you, the closer that it's getting, I think I could be completely wrong. It could be anything at this point. I can't think of what else it could be, but it could literally be anything.
Yeah.
Or you would sound sensible, I guess. But, yeah.
I mean, they're running 3 cars this month for the Indianapolis 500 with Juan Pablo Montoya as the 3rd car. So, I mean, they're trying to expand in IndyCar too. So they're trying to expand their horizons everywhere. I figure the Formula E one is probably the most likely because you see all these other manufacturers that are there. And I think there are a couple of manufacturers that are thinking of bailing out, like Porsche, now that they're committing to the LMDH or LMPH or whatever it's called, formula with Penske. How long are they going to be involved in Formula E relative to having to commit to that? Like there's other manufacturers that, depending on what they decide with Le Mans and Daytona and Sebring, they might bail on one formula and put it into that. Like that's McLaren is also looking at going sports car racing too. So, because that's where Zach Brown's driving career. He did open wheel racing back in the day, and then he spent most of his career driving in sports car racing. So I figure that's where that might be something too. That might be an idea as well.
Maybe they intend on moving away from Bahrain ownership.
Well, you never know. I mean, unlikely, but
yeah, very unlikely.
Because obviously the financial windfall that they had from selling their technology center and then leasing it, maybe they're saying we're going to buy it back. We come across some money out after all. 98 years ahead of schedule, but
yeah,
no, it literally could be anything for all we know. I can't think of what it could be in particular, but I'm very excited over what it could be. And in Monaco as well, it might be something linked to the Monaco race. So I doubt it'd be a new livery just for Monaco. I mean, you wouldn't go to all that trouble, would you?
I want Daniel Ricciardo to drive a GM Goodwrench scheme in honor of his favorite driver, Dale Earnhardt. That's the way it should be. It makes sense. He drives an Intimidator scheme at the tightest circuit, and he runs into Nikita Mazepin and sends him into the fence. That would be the ultimate Dale Earnsohn, Daniel Ricciardo. But it won't happen.
Sounds like a James Bond plot more than anything else at Monaco of all places.
Well, for him, he could be James Bond. That's fine. But
just a bit like the tuned skit from a couple of years ago where they were doing the historic stuff. And who was it? The McLaren driver at Monaco that had to go off and fight a spy.
Oh, James Hunt, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course it was James Hunt.
Of course it's James Hunt.
That really happened. I don't know why they did the adaptation of it. No wonder Niki Lauda won that race.
I don't remember seeing that show up in Rush.
That would have actually been a good part there, because it would have probably given us another reason to see Olivia Wilde. So that would have made me happy. But
yeah, can't argue with that logic.
Yeah. No. But on that note, I guess that's a good time to call the post show. So thank you very much if you stuck with us. Thank you very much for every talking point and stuff that we got given, particularly Adam with the McLaren thing that I wasn't even aware of. So it just goes to show what you miss when you take time off social media, even if it's for a good cause. But anyway, thank you very much to everyone that's tuned in, and we hope that you